We are team 11 and our project title is
Clicker not working, or
No.
let me see if I can fix it real quick. Is it plugged in? There should be a little. I think somebody might have grabbed the clicker. Remote thing. Does somebody have an extra flash drive for one of the teams who's up here?
Mine. I have mine.
Well, no, I mean, I think somebody. Oh, yeah, the clicker. I know. Let's see. Although we need to find the clicker. Is there anybody that came here and had a? All right. I think the clicker was sitting here. So one of the teams that came up here, I think you guys accidentally grabbed the clicker.
It should be already plugged.
Yeah, it should be already plugged, but I think you guys accidentally grabbed the clicker. Anybody have an extra flash drive or what looks like a flash drive?
It was there when I left, so I...
Right, yeah.
You guys got that thing?
No.
All right, we'll check in the break and see, because yeah, somebody has picked this up, so. Okay, sure, we can use yours. Okay, thanks.
Working? Turn it on. It's on.
Screen may be frozen.
मैंने वो ठीक है मेरे लिए ये बीच में चूतिया ऐसा समझ में नहीं आएगा It's being installed.
Yeah.
It's going to take a few seconds.
It's installing the
Oh, the
software.
driver, yeah.
Maybe it's in the drawer or the...
Yeah. So I think probably somebody that was loading it may have accidentally picked it up.
क्वेश्चंस कब चाहिए
सिस्टम्स इसमें ट्रांसफर लेना चाहिए
Hi class, we are team 11 and our paper is to do GTM principle need to change, learning from a comparison to Google. So our project presentation agenda is introduction purpose, which will be, and methodology, which will be explained by Christopher, our off-campus student. Then I'll explain the findings and comparison, and then Florian will discuss about the limitations and opportunities. So now I welcome Christopher to explain the rest of the slides.
The main thesis of the paper was to compare organizational characteristics for continuous innovation with total quality management principles and discussing those Google as an example. Through the methodology, there was a literature review, which highlighted the processes of total quality management and the development history and criticism of. This was a very extensive review. There were a lot of detailed documents that were reviewed for this. Then all of those were compared to a Google case study where 28 Google employees were interviewed in 2010 over a 10-month period. It was very management-centric, and the results were compared to the results of the literature to try and draw out isomorphic conclusions. Extending the methodology, the core of the thesis was based around the comparison of Google and total quality management. But there was one major source for the Google side of the analysis. Foundation for this method is cited as Dubois and Gaddy. It was an article in Journal of Business Research. The context and methodology outlined in the justification didn't really adequately explain the methodology for scientific reliability. The method and case study outlined for the source highlights the reasoning for a single case study and how it was used in a nonlinear method to compare theoretical and empirical framework, and the case study for affirmation of the thesis data. As a single source, case study really lacked the solid core to form the conclusions, and there wasn't an analysis of bias or any explanation as to why the Google is representative element, other than a footnote explanation that Google Inc. was selected as the company well known for continuous innovation. Extending the methodology, the core of the thesis was based around the comparison of Google and total quality management. But there was one major source for the Google side of the analysis. Foundation for this method is cited as Dubois and Gaddy. It was an article in Journal of Business Research. The context and methodology outlined in the justification didn't really adequately explain the methodology for scientific reliability. The method and case study outlined for the source highlights the reasoning for a single case study and how it was used in a nonlinear method to compare theoretical and empirical framework, and the case study for affirmation of the thesis data. As a single source, case study really lacked the solid core to form the conclusions, and there wasn't an analysis of bias or any explanation as to why the Google is representative element, other than a footnote explanation that Google Inc. was selected as the company well known for continuous innovation. This quote that Google Inc. was selected as the company well known for continuous innovation is active in a rapidly changing internet service industry. The source material around Google really should be solidified. It was a faulty generalization, logical fallacy to assume that everyone would agree with that. There's no metrics or anything to back that up. And that's really the foundation for why they chose even Google as a topic, let alone the topics or the paper that was defined.
So before starting with the findings of the paper, I would like to talk a little about Google. Google was established in 1998 in September, and in its early days they were against management and managers. So they believed that Eric Flatty, the software engineer in Google, according to him, he says that we are a company built by engineers for engineers. So they had a belief that management is a waste of time. Engineers should focus only on debugging and writing codes. So according to Google, it was destructive and communication is a waste of time for them. So in 2002, they came up with a flat organization without hierarchy. They eliminated all the management and managerial stuff from the organization, but eventually they failed. And as they grew as an organization, they realized the importance of management, and then they realized how management can help them in building strategies, communication, projects, promoting teamwork, career development center for the employees of Google, and focusing on company's goal. So the paper says things which are similar to TQM and Google's management as well. So before going further, do you guys know what the symbol means, this plus and arrow thing? Are you familiar with this? Okay. This is, it represents like both the thing leadership and product quality are proportional. If leadership goes up, quality will go up, and if it goes down, it will go down. So, according to TQM and Google, leadership is very important and it promotes product quality. And leadership has two impact on the output of business, which is direct and indirect, whereas Google supports indirect more because direct impact of leadership is more about micromanaging, telling employees what to do and how to do, which Google don't like. In 1994 and 1996, Plain, Calvin and Johnson also believed the same, that TQM will enhance innovation by a continuous improvement and customer value, whereas Prajogo and Sohel, along with the research paper, they believe that TQM is a hindrance to innovation because they just focus on customer demand. So difference between customer value and customer demand, I will discuss it a bit later. We are all familiar with this book, The New Economic by Deming. In this book, Deming says that focusing on customers and predicting the future can enhance innovation only if the people working in the system understands the system well, because customer can never be the innovator. They'll never ask for a new product. For instance, let's consider a phone. Like now the phone have a edge thing. We never demanded for an edge screen. The company and the engineers came up with that. Similarly, a carburetor company used to manufacture carburetors, and their motto was to develop a better quality of carburetor. That was the customer demand. They needed a cheap but high product quality carburetor. And all of a sudden an injector came up and carburetor was gone. So it depends on what's the motto of the company, and here is the difference between customer demand and customer value. It's a notion that TQM is all about customer satisfaction, but people ignore the visualize the future world and how it helps the customer. That's the example just I gave. So TQM is still considered a tool that explores the present knowledge instead of innovating things. But the paper supports it has no supporting example for the same. As the paper says that TQS will only help an industry if the market is stable. But in the 1950s, Deming, using his philosophy, helped Toyota in a very uncertain market to grow. And Cosby and Deming 1997 said that TQM can help a company grow in an impulsive environment. Coming back to Google, Google believes in two incentive systems, which is external motivation and internal motivation, and they believe both of them enhances performance. For this reason, they use both the external motivation, such as they have an informal management system, they have amusement parks, gyms and all, so that the employees in the company can have their own free time, which is 20% of 100%. 20% is given to the employees' own time, they can do whatever they want. And they also believe in intrinsic motivation, and they have a strong culture. I'll discuss that point later. But Deming was against extrinsic incentives, because according to him it would demoralize and take away work pride from the employees. So the Kay and Novak also supported Deming's philosophy, as they said that innovation innovation can only help a company if company organization support exists. That is, there should be a collaboration within the company. They should work for a common goal. And Novak believes that innovation and quality cannot exist in isolation. They need to be together. So these were few points which information that the research paper was giving us was, it talked about the long-term philosophy of Google, which we know that it represents Toyota's first principle. And similarly, it talked about the importance of communication and how transparent Google is, how researchers value the standardization of work so that they can manage the time-within working system. But according to paper, Google practices push system, as they innovate new things and push it into the market. Whereas it is the only thing which is against TQM, as it encourages pull system. And it says it like pull system reduces inventory issues, but Google being a software industry, they don't face inventory issues. The research paper, although they lack these principles, as in they have not discussed anything about work distribution of the company or flow of work or use of visual control and benching and good. So any of you have read the book How Google Works? Why? No? Okay, it's a book you have written? Okay, so the book says that they do follow these principles. Like they do follow equal work distribution and continuous flow of work and visual control. Because I don't remember the year, but they had an advertisement issue. The Google ad, there was something which was not liked by the CEO. So instead of going to the advertisement department, he just used the visual control technique and put a slogan in the kitchen of the Google saying, "These ad sucks." That's it. And in 1 week, an engineer from the Google, which was not responsible for the advertisement department, came up with a solution to the problem. So they believe in open discussion and open solution to all, as they believe that more eyeball reduces the problem. So there are many more things which we can discuss in the question answer round. Now I would like to invite Florian to discuss the rest, opportunities and limitations of the.
So now it's the limitation and opportunities of the research paper. At first, I've got some interesting aspects what could be a limitation or opportunity. The limitation could be a term of methodology or characteristics design that influence the interpretation of the results. So a methodology is a general research strategy that is undertaken, that is outlined in which way research is to be undertaken, and it defines the methods to be used in it. So the methods are the mode of data which could be collected and which could be collected. Furthermore, a limitation is the restriction of the generalizability as well utility of findings. For example, if the author wants to analyze 6 articles, it is okay, but he could also say, I want to analyze 100 articles. It could be okay as well, as long as they fit with this approach what you want to analyze. Furthermore, it depends on the author to what extent limitation should exist. Therefore, keep in mind, if you set a limitation, what consequences could occur of the limitation. So, the potential impact of the limitations. Furthermore, a limitation could be the basis of future opportunity research. For example, if you want to analyze a problem but haven't yet enough data to analyze it, you can do it in the future if you have enough data to do it. So our first limitation is about the restriction of methodology. Therefore, the author interviewed 28 managers over an 8-month period in 2010. They have to describe 7 organizational elements and dependence on their significance for Google's innovativeness. So the strategy behind this is to find 8 organizational characteristics for continuous innovation, short OCCI. Because you can have a lot of different concepts and characteristics in an organization, but you only want to compare the key concepts and characteristics with the principles of TQM. So the author tries to keep the data to a dealable amount. Furthermore, the second limitation is about the restriction of the TQM concepts. Therefore, the author shrinks the number of concepts to a useful and relevant data size for the analysis of TQM in the light of Google. So there are a lot of different TQM concepts, and he only wants to compare the one concept that fits with this approach of Google. So he selected 2 concepts The first one is the TQM broader concept, which is about strong culture and employee empowerment. The second one is a more narrow concept, which is about focus on measurement and statistical methods. The last one, the narrow concept, doesn't require Google's approach because Google is a partly self-organized and semi-structured organization in which control and chaos are balanced. So this doesn't fit with the narrow concept. So the author decides to compare the Google characteristics with the TQM broader concept. Therefore, he said that he only wants to compare elements which are fitting with the elements of the OCCI. Now to our first future opportunity. The first future opportunity is the new TQM broader concept. TQM should include efficiency as well as innovation. Google had such a concept which include continuous improvement as well as continuous innovation. As Abhishek explained before, that the employees got a free time from over 20% to create their own ideas, to work on their ideas, and to develop. So the aim for a new TQM concept should be an organization in which control and chaos are balanced. Because the key for good innovation is the employee itself. So the new TQM broader concept should trust employees to be good decision makers and innovators. But they don't mention how to be this. So a future opportunity approach could be a trainee program and leader selection that deals with the managing and organizing people for innovation. The second future opportunity is the brand issue TQM. Well, it's still associated with continuous improvement and quality. But as you learn from this case study, TQM should be included continuous improvement as well as continuous innovation. So a rebranding strategy is necessary to change this issue. But there are a lot of different starting points to change this issue from the scratch. Therefore, the future researcher could ask himself how to change the issue, where to begin with the new definition, or what points are important to create a new TQM concept. So, now our conclusion. The Google case study was not sufficient to develop a comparison to TQM. It seems both OCCI and TQM have similar characteristics, but different approaches and definitions. Furthermore, the paper relates only TQM with the soft methods, but forgets the hard methods. So the researcher said that TQM is only about quality and improvement, but not about improvement and innovation. So a redefining of the TQM is necessary for the better understanding of the principles. Here are our references. Are there any questions? Yes.
In the very next to the last slide, you talked about the. Here we go. One more. Back. About the TQM being redeveloped. Too far back. Too far back.
Towards the end.
Okay.
Almost to the very end. No, more. At any rate, it's okay. You mentioned the part about whatever source you quoted, advising TQM to be needs to be redefined. Would you personally agree that TQM is still in its evolution as regards some situations like this one here, or other companies and what have you, or different industries?
It depends, because I would say Google defines TQM in this way that it would approach with their characteristics, but actually the researcher of this paper doesn't come up with the idea that there are a lot of more concepts, and he shrinks the number of the concepts to this amount that they only fit with some parts of the OCCI of Google, but actually I guess if he had a wider view for the other concepts, he would come with the idea that TQM is now in the evolution that they include continuous innovation.
Correct. And since your last word there, I have another question about the innovation.
Okay.
You mentioned it throughout, so no particular slide. At any rate, Google, or anyone here probably understands, Google or any web-based company, innovation is core. Is that not correct? Anyone can see that.
Yes.
Therefore, that is simply just part of their process, whether they understand it or not. As concerns marketing, which is what any of these companies are about as well, there is such a thing called marketer's dilemma. The marketer's dilemma states, if you innovate, you die, / innovate or die. You see the point? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with that concept. If you are, great. As concerns that particular marketing concept, how do you feel that meshes, if at all? On a personal level or professional level or otherwise?
I think it's necessary to go the step to innovate, because if you go even further to innovate, you will still be at the same level and don't get deeper into the market or satisfy the customer with new products or something else. And maybe the customer decides, okay, you don't want to buy your product any further, you buy the product from the maybe from another company. So it's necessary to innovate. Yes.
I have a comment about what the question that you asked to all of us about how, not you,
Okay.
about how total quality management should be adjusted to include innovation. Or that's what I understood.
Yes.
There is this book, it's called The Innovator's Dilemma, that revolutionary book that will change the way you do business. The author is Clayton M. Christensen. He's a PhD in Harvard Business. And I'm going to say, to quote,
Yes.
that was said, if good management practices drive the failure of successful firms faced with disruptive technology change, then the usual answer to company problems, planning better, working harder, becoming more customer-driven, and taking a longer-term perspective all exacerbate the problem. Second, execution, speed to market, total quality management, and process engineering are similarly ineffective. He's talking about how disruptive technology is the cause that total quality management is not used for innovation.
Okay.
That's why, I mean, there is a better description in here about what is sustaining technology and what is disruptive technology.
Yeah.
Just to share.
Okay.
Just share if you want to read it
Yeah.
because of the question that you put up. That's it.
Any more questions?
So you mentioned that only Google was selected, right? Google was the only case study, and it's a single case study. What other organizations or types of organizations do you think the authors should have selected to more thoroughly test their idea?
He should also mention maybe other case studies which are in the same field like Google. Maybe he should mention there for example, Microsoft or such other big company which deals with which deals with technology or something else. So he could compare their lifestyle philosophy of TQM as well.
You can also do the case study with mechanical companies like Bosch India or any automobile industry, so that it would be easier for the researcher to compare. As TQS is more about industry, production houses.
So do you think it's important then that all the organizations should be from the same industry, or you think you're suggesting they could be from different industries?
A different industry would be better to have a broader prospectus.
Should they have any sort of common characteristics, would you think, in terms of selecting a sample of multiple case studies? So I agree, maybe they could be across different industries. They could be within the same industry. That would be one choice. I mean, there's arguments for either approach. But are there any sort of common characteristics you think should be probably held constant across companies? Or?
The importance of management should be constant, and the role of management, how Google manages, like how not to micromanage and how to be a coach rather than a guide always.
I was thinking more for the selection. So when you're trying to figure out like a criteria for if you're going to include a company in the study or not, you know, one thing you could consider is industry, right? Say I'm going to use software industry as my selection criteria. Do you think of any other criteria you would use or potentially?
Yeah, for example, as Abhishek mentioned, Google changed their perspective of management in the year 2002. They said only engineers are responsible for good innovation, but nowadays they said that management is also responsible for good innovation. So maybe you can add the characteristics that the company changed their view about innovation.
Okay. Some evidence of a recent view of a change in their view toward innovation.
Okay. Yes.
You're talking about management change in Google, right? So I read an article about Google recently, and like 5 or 6 years, they were including different psychological factors. It's not a question, kind of comments. They were including different psychological factors of their employees to increase their performance. Actually, so they're looking. So let me give an example. Like people like food, right? So when we work for a long time, so we we get hungry and we like to have a kitchen in close, I think close distance to our workstation. So they're putting a kitchen in every like 100 meters. With 100 meters, they're putting a kitchen, and they also have some kind of amusement thing in their meetings. So they're actually taking a lot of psychological factors to improve their employees' efficiency or performance, etc.
Actually, Google also, the main thing Google emphasizes on is the recruitment process. They don't just recruit random people with just high scores. They search for people who can work 24 hours willingly and happily for them. So that's the reason they have this amusement park. Like the office is more of like a home, and if the employees willingly want to stay there for their entire life. So recruitment, if they don't recruit properly, then all of the rest won't be applicable to Google.
They actually change a lot from their beginning.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you.
I don't think that's yours.
Sorry.
Oh, you could have taken ours.
Hello, everybody. This is Armando. I'm here. This is and Michael Furman is not here. He's a distant learner, but he will be virtually speaking. But I'm here to share with you, not to lecture, to share what we learned in this article, and also to share to you what we know and a different approach to that article. What we have in here, what we're going to present to you right now, is a friendly critique of the article, how the machine whole the publication of the book, The Machine That Changed the World, Changed the Management Thinking, exploring 25 years of lean literature. Womack, this author, and well, these three authors, but principally the book is not for him. In this book, that term lean is coined for the very first time, and that's how it became popular. And the authors of this article are trying to research about it. Our agenda, I already give you who we are. We're going to have a brief introduction of the whole paper. We'll give you an overview of the analyzed paper. And also, we're going to provide a critique. But a critique, watch out, a critique is not only finding mistakes, faults, and drawbacks, but also it's about providing ways to solve the critique and the problems. You know, the findings, the drawbacks, every problem that you find in the literature, and we're also going to give you our conclusions. Our presentation is divided into sections. The first section is Michael is going to talk about the objective of the analyzed paper. He's going to talk about the methodology that the authors follow and also the findings. I'm going to talk about a little bit about the relationship with Deming and Leakey's work, and also I'm going to provide you a different aspect, a different way of seeing the literature review that the author is giving in here. We're going to provide you a different way of analyzing data. He is going to provide you the limitations, and also in the limitation you will see that we will explore that the paper lacks of internal and external validity and reliability, because we want to point out that the paper has an opportunity to be improved, and we're going to describe it later. I think this is Michael Parks.
Krasik was the first to employ the term lean manufacturing as it applies to management when he used the term to describe the Toyota production system in his publication of The Triumph of the Lean Production System in 1988. However, the authors of our article suggest it was actually the publication of the book The Machine That Changed the World by Womack, Jones, and Roos, which helped make the term lean popular among management in the industry. So, as the title of our article suggests, the authors wanted to explore 25 years of lean literature to see what impact the publication of The Machine That Changed the World had on the industry. And in doing so, they had two objectives. The first, in the book, The Machine That Changed the World, the authors, Womack, Jones, and Roos, make the prediction that the lean concept would become widely adopted and would spread throughout industries and nations. So, the authors, Samuel, Found, and Williams, in our article, wanted to explore through 25 years of literature to see what evidence either supports this claim or disproves this claim. And along with that, if the term had spread, the authors wanted to explore through what means did the term spread. The methodology used by the authors in order to carry out their research was a systematic literature review. And in order to do so, they selected 4 main databases to pull information from: ABI Inform Global, Emerald Library, EBSCO Business Source Premier, and Google Scholar, along with various management journals. And the data gathered from these sources were then compiled into what the authors called the Lean Publications Database, or LPD. And the LPD would provide the quantitative evidence whether the term lean had spread throughout the industry or not. And Figure 2 here shows the structured process that the authors followed in order to carry out the review. So they selected the 4 main databases, and then they chose certain terms and keywords, as you'll see in the next slide, to filter the articles by. The articles were then identified by year, exported to the EndNote software, encoded, and that formed the Lean Publications database. Figure 3 shows the lean terms and keywords that were used to filter the articles from the previously mentioned databases in order to form the Lean Publication database. And the Lean Publication database was based on the EndNote referencing software, which is generally used for storing and retrieving bibliographic references from online databases. And in order to prevent the duplication of data, they chose Business Source Premier as the sole database for the EndNote referencing software. Also, to adjust for generic growth of publications from 1987 to 2013, the authors of the article used an adjustment technique where the number of lean articles for any 1 year were multiplied by the ratio of the total articles on Business Source Premier database by the total articles for that year. This is similar to the technique that economists use in order to transform nominal currency into real currency amounts, thereby reducing any effect of inflation. So figure 3 was taken directly from the article and shows the raw data from the Lean Publications database, not adjusted for the generic growth in publications. They've also delineated by source, such as academic, trade journal, magazine, as well as a total. And as you can see by looking at the graph, there is a definite increase in Lean publications starting from about 1990, which was when the book, The Machine That Changed the World by Womack, Jones, and Roos was published, through 2013, which was the span that the authors chose. Figure 4 was also taken directly from the article and shows the adjusted data from the Lean Publications database corrected for the generic growth in publications for any 1 year. And again, as you can see, starting from about 1990 up through 2013, there was a definite increase in publications on the term lean. And the authors cite this as evidence to support the claims made by Womack, Jones, and Roos that lean had spread beyond the automotive industry and became popular since the publication of their book. So as we've seen from the previous slides, the authors believed they had satisfied their first objective in showing that lean had in fact spread since the publication of the book, The Machine That Changed the World by Womack, Jones, and Roos in 1990. So with that, their next objective was to look at through what means did lean spread. And during their research, they identified 4 main themes of discourse on lean. The first being lean as a generic representation of the Toyota production system. And people were observing the Toyota production system, synthesizing the key aspects and traits, applying them to different fields, and publishing their research and results. The next being lean as a process improvement methodology. And again, it's kind of similar to the first one. They were observing the Toyota production system, and they were more focusing on principles like Six Sigma, total quality management, Kaizen, and just-in-time manufacturing as tools you could use to improve your processes in manufacturing. And then third was lean as an ideological movement that has emerged over time. And the authors define a movement as a series of actions and events taking place over a period of time and working to foster a principle or policy. And they cite the publication of the book, The Machine That Changed the World, in 1990 as the catalyst that started the lean revolution in America. And then lastly, you have lean as a polarizing body of academic literature. So along with The Machine That Changed the World, there were other publications on lean by those who supported the concept and the ideology. And then you also had those who criticized it, and so they would publish articles and books pointing out the weaknesses and the lack of robustness in the research being done on lean. So you had a growth in publications on both sides as well.
But I'm just going to continue again. As you can see, if you have, I mean, for the few of us that have a time, I don't know how many of you, but the few of us that may have a little experience in data mining, and as the author said that they gathered 4,000 and something papers, finding just 4 clusters, I think is too small. And also, this as a validation of their findings, I think also it's quite something. There's something wrong, you know. There's something that might not match. So, especially when we want to connect and analyze, when we want to use the analyzing criteria, the relationship with eminent liquors as analyzing criteria, we find that there was something quite wrong in the paper. Before that, we're going to say that we're going to define technology. the process by which an organization transforms labor, capital, materials, and information into products and services of greater value. Therefore, Lean fits in this definition, and we're going to treat Lean as a technology. And we're going to use that tools that belongs to the field of technology management to analyze what the author did not. Well, first, what triggered that point is that Licker, Dr. Deming and Dr. Lickers is not ever mentioned in that paper. They are not ever mentioned in the paper. But we know he created a fertile soil for Lean to be adopted. Also, because of his influence, there was a big push from the Japanese industry that he influenced that also pushed Lean to be adopted. And he published the breakthrough article that the people that we are practitioners of Toyota, we know it, is the second Toyota paradox. How delaying decisions can make better cars faster. This is a breakthrough article, and it changed that way we think in 1995, just 3 years after Womack's book. And Womack is never mentioned in the references. So we see like there's an evolutionary pattern in here. Something is not good in that paper. Therefore, we said there are many ways of approaching this problem. First, we can use Forrester algebra or Forrester language as you want it, and we can model with the data that we have. We can model different patterns, or we can use the causal diagrams also to have insights, what's going on. This is not publishing material, but it's a part of the technique that you can use. Second, we can use the S-curves. This is the most basic way of model technology evolution. We can, for instance, we're going to take this as an example. The author could have done this. Deming, Womack, maybe Licker. This could be an approach, but he never explored it. Another way is using evolutionary patterns in technology. We're going to use the RAP. We have a color distribution. We can have a dominant archetype. We can have a directional selection, so it's evolving. Or we can have a disruption. You can get that with the data. And you will wonder, what algorithms can we use? Semantic algorithms. You can use a program that is called Invention Machine that is based on semantic algorithm and is to analyze papers and patents to use trees as a methodology. Somebody mentioned trees last class, and I think, oh, that's awesome. Trees is a great example of how technology evolves. Another way of evolutionary pattern, this is a different notation. We can have divergence, radiation, parallel evolution, or convergence. Is never explored in the paper. Another way is, based on this, is to use phylogenetic trees. You can have here clusters. According to the criteria that you use to classify the evolution in clusters, you can, for instance, say that the main methodology that you use in Lean studies is case study, for instance, but we're not using like, let's say like ethnography or other methodology of research. We're not using cohort analysis. Or we can also see that how Lean is evolving for fields. It is spread over one field, it's spread over another. There's another way to observe the clusters in a phylogenetic tree. And I'm going to show an example of how technology could be analyzed as trees. The first law was published in Western because in Russia was done before, in the 20 years before it was done in Russia. But in Western society, we can get know a little bit in 1976. Three laws of evolution, a Schuler for trees. I know you guys are kind of familiar because maybe some of you took a class in advanced ergonomics and you have some trees knowledge. But This is how it was born. You can use trees technology to forecast technology evolution with appearance. You can use other methodologies. You can use to forecast different methodologies. I mean, in technology evolves. This is the global part of an S-curve, as I mentioned before. He's going to talk a little bit more about this topic.
Hello everyone, I'm Abhishek and I'm going to deal with the critique of the paper. So first we'll be looking at two flaws of the paper, and then I'll be highlighting the two researches that can be further expanded upon depending on the flaws that we have analyzed. So the first flaw that I'm going to talk about is the methodology. So as Mike has described, that the databases that the authors had used in this paper were these 4 databases, and but when they had selected these 4 databases, in order to formulate the lean publication database or the LPD, they had just used one single, which is the BSC or Business Source Premier. Wait, why did they use that single one, and why did they mention like 4 databases? So the reason for using this single database out of these 4 was, first, using Business Source Premier actually helped them to get the whole literature, and secondly, as the authors mentioned, it also ensured that they could prevent duplication of similar lean literature. So the question that pops up in our mind is like, what are the criteria that the authors have used in order to select these 4 databases in the first place? That's something that's not mentioned in the paper. And secondly, if they had used one single database in order to formulate the lean publication database, why was there the mention of these 4 databases at all? That is something that needs to be addressed, and it's something that is not mentioned in the paper. Continuing with the first one, the authors mentioned, as Mike has already mentioned, that these are the lean key terms that they had used in order to chalk out the lean publications from the LPD. Now, throughout the paper, the authors have mentioned that lean is something that is so hard to define, and also it is very industry specific and it has diffused over time. So let me quote something from the paper that they have used. The potential phrases that could have been included are vast. However, the following terms in Table 1, which is this table, were chosen as representative but by no means exhaustive of a significant proportion of publications, selected to represent a balance between breadth and focus. Well, they have said that this is something that is representative but not exhaustive. So were there any other lean terms that they were using in order to chalk out their publications? Something that's not mentioned. So probably I'm assuming that they had used, but they are not been, they haven't mentioned over here. So does that necessarily ensure that the lean literature that they had collected over the 25 years period is exhaustive? Something to think about. Okay, the second limitation that I'm going to talk about are the findings. So as Mike has already mentioned, that in the whole 25-page paper that the authors have formulated, they just have shown just 2 trends. The first one, the unadjusted counts for lean literatures for the year 1987 to 2013, and there are like 4130 number of papers, and that was just raw data, like the raw number of papers that were lean literature that was available at that time. And the second, graph that they have shown was the adjusted count. So where they have multiplied the unadjusted counts of the lean literature that were available for that time into something they call as a growth multiplication factor, and they have like used it to formulate the adjusted count for the lean publications for the time. So the authors define growth multiplication factor as the total number of publications for the year 1984 divided by the total publication for a period of time that lies within that period for which they have carried out their analysis. So what essentially, it does look like very logical for us to think that when we are using something adjusted count, we can get better representation of data, but on further analysis what we have found is by adjustment factor, the authors are generally getting what we call the weighted percentage of lean literature for any period of time, any year that lies within this period of time. So how is it? So we have taken one example. Say for the year 2000, the growth multiplication factor is defined as the total number of publications for 1984 divided by the total number of publications for the year 2000. And like when we are adjusting the lean publications that were available for the period for that particular year 2000, and we are transforming that into what we call the adjusted count. This is like the lean publications for 2000 multiplied by the growth adjustment factor, which is a GMF. And this thing is exactly equal to what we have seen over here. What this gives us is this is the percentage of the lean literature that was available for the year 2000 into C, which is a constant, where C is defined by the total publications for 1984 upon 100. So this is essentially what a weighted percentage of the lean literatures that were available at that period of time. So it's like I'm meeting Elizondo and I'm saying, wait, you've got like 27 out of 30 in your exam, and the next moment I'm coming back to him and saying, wait, you've got like 90%. Is it the same thing? Yeah, it is the same thing. So is there any difference between adjusted and the unadjusted counts, what the authors have done in this paper? It's something you need to think about. Well, the next part is the opportunities that I'll be talking about. The first one is the formation of the LPD system. So this is essentially an extension of the first limitation that I had talked about. The authors, as I have already said, they have used only BSP as the sole source of the publication in order to formulate their LPD. Why? Because they wanted to prevent duplication of similar lean publications for that particular period of time. So what they could essentially have done was they could have installed some kind of algorithm over there. So depending on the similarities in text and the word count, they could have used that same algorithm to check out the duplicate lean publications that were available at that time, and that could have been rejected from the whole data set. That could have ensured that the authors got a grasp of like a bigger amount of literature, not just 4130 number of papers, and maybe that could have given them a more accurate study for the period of time that they have carried out their analysis. Maybe. So the next opportunity that I'm talking about is the lean expansion and diffusion that has been carried out. So as Mike has already said, that lean diffusion has been divided into 4 discourses over the period of time from 1987 to 2013, and they fall under these 4 categories. This is somewhat similar to what we describe as Geoffrey Moore's technology adoption life cycle. What essentially this bell curve defines is like when a new technology is developed in the market, how the market reacts to that new technology. So there is some kind of similarity. So over here, the technology enthusiasts are a representation of lean as it was carried out within the total Toyota production system. So at that time, there was no lean concept. It was just being practiced within the walls of Toyota production system. And when people actually saw what it was essentially addressing and the improvements that they had got, they had carried out to the next stage, which is the visionary stage, where lean was being studied and the lean term was coined, and after that, they were using it to improve processes by addressing the 8 kind of ways that we had talked about in the last presentation. After that, we see the market reacting with a big, this is like 35% on either side of it. So this is where the lean actually transforms from a process improvement methods to becoming an ideological movement. So it shifts from just being one process improvement method to a bigger aspect where it is applied to not just automotive or manufacturing sectors, but throughout industry. Although we haven't seen the back end of this bell curve, but we are sure like lean is somewhere within this thing. But one thing that I needed to mention is that the authors in their analysis have never said any specific period of time for which these lean discourses could be divided. Something that the authors have mentioned in the paper is like the database, talks about the LPD, lean publication database, is sufficiently representative to provide evidence of patterns of lean discourse as a proxy for lean diffusion over time and as a flexible data source that can be expanded in the future. They further state that the data collection method is the development of an LPD which serves the primary purpose of providing quantitative evidence that lean has diffused over time. wait a minute, I have never seen any kind of quantitative evidence that the authors have carried out in order to divide the lean publications into these 4 classes. So what we have essentially done is like within the literature, the authors have explained these 4 lean diffusion methodologies in 6 pages, and we have gathered all the referential publication years for those for these 4 classes, and we had carried out analysis in order to find out what type of distribution curve they generated, so that we can have some kind of idea about whether they fall into some category of time period or not. So we had used an input analyzer to do that, and this is the distribution curve that we got as lean as a representation of GPS. It's a triangular distribution curve. This is for the second discourse that the authors have mentioned as a process improvement methodology. This is a Weibull distribution. The third one is an ideological movement. We've got like beta distribution curve, and for the fourth one, it's the same beta distribution curve, which describes lean as a polarized body of academic literature. So over here, we have summarized all the 4 curves that we have seen. Forget about the expression. What I needed to show to you all is like the mean for all the 4 discourses are the same. And if we look at the range, for the first 2, the range is from 1980 to 2010. And for the last 2, it's 1990 to 2010. So over here, we see there is a lot of overlap in what we have analyzed. So this we cannot take as something very conclusive for the period of time for which the 4 discourses the authors have mentioned. So essentially what we had, what we think is an opportunity for the authors to expand the literature would be to take all those 4130 number of papers, lean publications, and use certain technologies like classification algorithms or maybe chi-square tests in order to throw them into certain classes of time period for which the authors think they are applicable. And this is essentially within the scope of the literature. Okay, with this I come to my part, and Eliza will be talking about the conclusion.
Hello guys, it's me again. Well, I'm going to tell you about the conclusions that we have about the paper. They are not all negative. I mean, even though they look negative, it's all findings. I mean, that's the areas that we think that paper could be improved in the future using different techniques: statistical, data mining, evolution algorithms, semantic algorithms, classification algorithms, etc. There is no clear criteria for selecting the lean publication database they use. The peer review articles in indexed journals are not included because this database it does not include only, as a condition, only indexed peer review journals. If you want to perform a really good gathering data, you have to use IC, Web of Knowledge, or Scopus, or other kind of databases that they have a condition only indexed journals and peer review articles. The methods that they use as the authors, they do not assure validity and reliability. The validity should be internal and external. It's not assured either one. There are no correlations or gaps analysis. That when you're reading a literature review, that's what you're interested in. You want to know where you can contribute in the future. And it's not there. And that means Enliker's work is not included, which for us means something really bad, because they are big players in the lean literature. This is the references. Any questions? We can go back to the future. Just in honor of the movie. It was yesterday. So, any question, guys?
That was interesting, the analysis that you did to look at the trends. So like you said, look at the 4 themes they identified and looked at the trends over time. How did you figure out when to map an article to a particular theme? Was that from the
So the authors in the last few pages, they have described all the 4 discourses.
Right.
So we have taken all the publication. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So we have taken all the publication years for the articles that they have referenced in those descriptions, I'd say, and then we had collected those years and put them into Excel files. We would analyze the feature of Arena, and then we had carried out the analysis.
Okay, so it's based on the references they cited in each section?
Exactly,
Okay, okay.
exactly. So that kind of gave us the idea that it's not something very conclusive thing that you can rely upon. So what we had suggested as the expansion would be for the 0132 number of papers that they had collected over the 25-year period. They could have, divided those things into which classes they belong to. It could have given us a better picture of lean diffusion of time.
Yeah, so it's not for all the articles, it's only for the ones that they cited, I guess.
That they have referenced, yeah. They have reference 5 pages of references.
Right, so,
That's the best thing we can do, because
Right.
the author does not also include a statement that says, if you want the database that we use, you can ask it.
oh, that would be nice.
That would be
Yeah,
nice.
yeah, that would be.
I mean, it says they get a quantitative evidence that heat has diffused over the year, but there is hardly any quantitative evidence.
But when if you're in economics, writing a paper in economics or in any other discipline, when you have to gather a lot of data and you have to perform data mining, you have always, as a polite way to your readers to say, like, if you want the data, ask for me for the data, and I send it to you to this address. And you can email me, and I can send it to you. I mean, it's something that is like a
Right, or provide a website, or, yeah. That would have been nice if they made it publicly available, but obviously they want to publish more papers with it, right? So.
But they have said it's replicable and stuff.
But I mean, they say that, but if you lack of reliability, it means there's something wrong. We found that with the information that they lack reliability and validity. Any other questions? Yeah.
As concerns lean itself,
Yeah.
it's obvious that, lean's here to stay no matter what form it assumes. Do you guys on a personal or professional level feel that lean is
I have practiced lean a lot when I was in the industry. I work in 3 different industries. Well, 4. I did research in Iowa State in data mining, bioinformatics. I work in a petrochemical company, and I work for a steel company, and I work for a consulting company that used to work for the cement company, and we used to practice a lot the lean philosophy. We adopted it seriously.
Okay. And so the elements of lean, in other words, do you on a personal or professional level feel that lean is in further development, which probably it is? My question is, would you care to make any predictions as to what form it might take?
With the information that the author provides, it's not possible for us to make any prediction. That's why we consider in here that if you want to perform predictions where the information is going, you have to perform a sort of this. Because you have clusters and you have where there are voids. It's a visual representation of the data, when you can observe where are voids, area of opportunities, where all the data is clustered, and it's a good labor of data mining, but it takes time. And you have to use our project, or you can use Invention Machine. That Invention Machine is already programmed to use semantic algorithms to detect things. Did I answer the question? Okay. Any other questions?
Okay. We will discuss the adjustment algorithm, right, that they use, which I thought that was kind of an interesting feature. I'd never seen that before. And I think you were describing that your conclusion is really that unadjusted data and adjusted data don't seem to be different.
Yeah, it's kind of representing the percentage of new publications for a year. It's like I'm giving you marks, and then I'm saying this is the percentage that I've got. It's the same thing, actually.
And when you guys were just researching this algorithm, because I think it was a little difficult from the paper, maybe, or did you figure out from the paper how they applied it, or did you go back to the sources they cited?
I did. It's like Abrahamson and Fairchild. Wait, I forgot to mention, for the GMF that they had used the year 1984. Now this year 1984, that doesn't even come within this period of time, 1987 to 2013. And Fairchild and Abrahamson in their paper, they had used So they had used 1984 as a year to make that GMF because their period of study was from 1974 to 1995, which kind of makes sense because 1984 is kind of the mean between that thing. But here it doesn't because it doesn't fall within the window of 1987 to 2030.
That's interesting. So they were using this multiplier from another article?
Yeah, that is like they have just borrowed the concept.
Interesting.
They have used it like to apply the same thing for the new publication database.
Right, but the multiplier that they got, or I guess they were using the actual multiplier they got from another article?
I didn't get your
Oh,
question.
so I guess was this, the total number of papers in 1984 and the total number of articles in 2000, did they draw that from their, I guess, their data then, or did they use it?
No,
as
they
their
use it from the
multiplier?
LPG publication.
They did, okay. They did.
So it's from BSB, Business Source Premier.
Right.
It's not, but this very definition of T 1984
Right,
by
84 and
T
2000,
any
yeah.
period of time between 1987 to 2013, that very concept is more
Right. Interesting.
In other words, it's too arbitrary.
Right, why they picked, I mean, yeah, why they picked those years.
I mean,
84,
yeah, it's like
2000,
1984 doesn't even belong to that
Yeah,
year.
that's very interesting. You're right, yeah, that seems kind of curious. Thank you, team. So there's,
Good evening, everyone. This is Team 6. Myself, Sulabh Sharma. This is my teammate, Marika Eitner. And we have a distance student in our team who is 20 Rogers. You guys will listen his voice after some time. So, our paper is based on literature review of empirical research methodologies in the field of lean manufacturing. So, this is the overview of our presentation. Overview of the art team purpose, paper purpose, methodologies in the paper, findings of the paper, relation of the paper with Demings and Leica, limitations of the paper. We will suggest some future scopes, conclusion, and references. So the purpose of our team is to give a critique of the paper by Justi and Kodali, which are the authors of a literature review of empirical research methodology in lean manufacturing. The objective of the paper by Justi and Kodali is to analyze and discuss the present scenario of LM, lean manufacturing empirical research methodologies, and suggest a future research directions. Okay. So lean manufacturing is growing at a faster pace since its inception from 1990. There are many articles published in lean manufacturing which are conceptual and empirical. If we see in the recent past years, the empirical research articles are growing at a faster pace rather than the conceptual articles. So the main motive of the authors is to review the literature, review the empirical literature published in the last 20 years from 1990 to 2009. Previously, if you see the last years, articles are published in the GI, just-in-time manufacturing, not in the field of other, like, articles are published in the field of just-in-time manufacturing, not in the field of the empirical researches. So, the empirical research is based on a systematic way to implement direct or indirect observations to gain knowledge. Yeah, the important thing in empirical research is it is based on theory building and theory verification. We can build theory on the basis of indirect and direct observations, and we can verify the previous theories on the basis of this. Okay, the methodologies which the authors followed in this article is in this way. Okay. they have followed this pattern: the time horizon of review, selection of journals, article selection, article classification, and analysis of articles. The time horizon they chose is 1990 to 2000. Selection of journals. There are many articles present in these days, but they selected 4 publication portals, which are Emerald, Online, Science Direct, Springer, and Terror Francis. Total they chose 599 articles among these 4 publication portals, but they were included conceptual. The articles included are conceptual and empirical both. So out of 599, 236 articles were empirical, and they applied the filtering process. Like they followed a process in which they chose the journals which followed. They chose the journals which published more than 2 articles in the field of empirical research. So they come out with a number of 178 articles from 24 journals. So the article selection articles are considered empirical if their main motive is for the article selection is this: the article are considered empirical one or more than one empirical research design. Empirical research designs are single case study, multiple case study, panel study, focus group study, and surveys. The next step is article classification, in which they followed a six stages of empirical research. First stage was the assorted articles on the basis of the purpose. If the article is based on theory building or it is based on the theory verification. According to, they assorted those articles. The second stage is article classification on the basis of empirical research designs. Like they classify articles on the basis of panel studies, focus group studies, and surveys, etc. As I told you in the previous slides. Third stage was to classify articles on the basis of data collection methods. The data collection methods are historical archive analysis, outside observations, etc., and questionnaire interviews, etc. And the fourth stage was implementing stage, in which they use different techniques to implement their classifications. Stage 5 was through data analysis. Data analysis is used like descriptive statistics, measure of dimensionality, similarities, difference, test of similarities, differences are implemented in the stage 5. Stage 6 is concluding and reporting the articles on the basis of their study. Analysis of articles. The descriptive study, including trends and pattern, involved in order to provide better understanding for development of empirical research in manufacturing. They use the different patterns and diagrams and tables in their articles to classify all the articles. On the basis of that, they analyze the articles. Right. Next part will be explained by Mark.
Yeah, so now we know what the article was about, and we want to know what actually came out, so what did the authors researched. So all the articles which have been reviewed for this paper, they focus on different kinds of waste in the lean manufacturing. This is obvious because it was just about lean manufacturing, and lean means production without waste. So just to remind everybody, there are 8 different kinds of waste, and in all the research papers, they've been covering 7 different kinds of waste. There was overproduction, the waiting, the unnecessary transport, which is inside of the company, so sometimes the way is too long from station A to B, so the production is longer. And then there's the excess of inventory, the unnecessary movement, which is sort of linked to the unnecessary transport, and then there are some defects. So what did so how did they split up over the research paper? So the frequency was, as you can see here, the unnecessary inventory was the most focused waste in all the articles. So out of the 100, about 80, it was around 60% they covered in there. So that was probably because there was not much before they researched it. So this was new to everybody. So as you can see here, the overproduction is only 21%, and that's probably because a lot companies have been focusing more on overproduction rather than on unnecessary inventory, because overproduction has a direct effect on the on money effects and so on, and on the what you win in the end. But unnecessary inventory you can't see directly at the end of the year, probably. So the significant findings, which they've been stating in the article at the end, was that the number of researchers they had in their time frame over lean manufacturing, it increased by the end of their time frame. This was because people get aware of lean manufacturing and they researched more. So the highest increase was in the last years, in 2005 and until 9. Actually, the number there tripled from the numbers before. We heard about that there was theory building and verification, and interesting fact is that they've been covered equally in all the articles they've been researched, which is kind of interesting since before, well, it was the first study of its kind. So normally you expect that theory building probably is a little more covered because you have to determine what you're talking about. But then in the last years, theory verification gained a little more than theory building because theory was already there. One statement which is kind of interesting is developing theory is through the process of a case study instead of a conceptual nature. So you actually have to do the case study instead of, yeah, well, it's just developing by itself. And most of the studies came from the US, the UK, and Spain, rather than from China, India, or other South Asian countries. This is due to that people have been more interested, or that there was more resources in the US and the UK and Spain to actually do the researches or to do the papers.
So the paper relation with the damming, which we observed, is a procedure and selection of the data collection methods. Damming and authors both have agreed that the proper procedure and selection of data collection method can improve the feasibility of the studies, and chances of success of the studies increase if we follow good selection of data collection methods like historical archive analysis, outside observations, participant observations. All these methods should come from a reliable sources, and they can affect the study a lot. The second is sample size. The accuracy of this study can increase if we increase the sample size. The more accurate is the sample, the accuracy of the analysis will increase. But at the same time, cost and time will be, if the sample is more, the cost and time will be more. So accordingly, we have to manage the sample size according to basis of our requirements. Third, which we observed in the third relation which we observed in our study is process standardization. Like the authors Justy and Kodali follow a standardized process to come up with the article selections. They followed a fixed standardized process to come up with. First they chose 599 articles, then they filtered the articles and came to 178 articles. So in if some article comes in which is based on empirical study, we can put into this category without wasting any time. The third was theory building and theory verification. According to Deming and both the authors, they focused more on theory building and theory verification. The third was theory of questions. The author, according to the authors in this paper, the theory building is the questions which we ask in theory building is what are the constructs, how and when they correlated, whom the constructs apply, and when they are applicable. We can see in Deming's theory of knowledge, he he indicated that these questions are really important if we have to take our query to success. The third was data optimization. Like, data optimization is really important in any studies. So in this article, authors have followed the data optimization process. They filtered all the articles and came, and in the last they come up with a pool of articles which was optimized, and from there they can improve their studies. Other Likert relation will be explained there.
So now we know the relation to Deming, and of course we have the relation to Leica as well. As you all know, there is RD4P in the Leica and the Toyota Way. So since this was all about lean manufacturing, we focus on the process, which is eliminating waste. So what have been the relations to Toyota Way, which was covered by Leica? They found so many papers that they have had to eliminate some of them, which is sort of the eliminating waste, because if they didn't, well, they had too much, and probably the research would have come to an end. So this is sort of the first relation which we found out. Then there's another relation to principle 2, which states there's create a continuous process flow to bring problems to the surface. So actually that was kind of what they've been looking for, where the problems in lean manufacturing, what have been people researching about. And the process was to review all the articles and then to classify them in order to have for each article the same classification or the same process to follow, so nothing gets left out. Next, there's the principle 7, which is also in relation to our paper. It is use visual control so no problems are hidden. This was actually covered a lot because most of the articles have been summarized in tables, and the outcome of all these have been put together in one table to conclude what all the articles have been about. And I think visualization is probably a very good thing to summarize a lot of data, because you can see it at one spot. What is it all about? So after that, there's another link that most articles focus about unnecessary inventory, which is of course one of the 8 wastes. And therefore they had a possible solution, not just for the unnecessary inventory, but as well for the eliminating waste, which was Kanban. And all the articles, they covered some more solutions, but Kanban was the one which was the most related to. So now this is our distance students. Should start.
However, like all studies, several limitations hindered some of the research and information presented. Limitations present restrictions and specific lines a study is bounded to throughout its execution. They can present both positive and negative effects for a study. By constraining some data, a clearer and more concise conclusion can be drawn. Yet, such factors could cause the study to lack the desired information or effect desired by the researchers. Along with positive and negative effects, limiting factors can be further identified initially when the study is begun. This can let the researchers adjust accordingly to allow for factors potentially out of their control. These factors could also potentially only be realized at the end of the study as well, dramatically affecting the data. And finally, a range of other possibilities could lend to restricting a study. Timing, physical environment, or cultural outlook are such cases. Almost anything can present a challenge to the researchers studying any type of topic. Now let us see what Josti and Kodali had to deal with. One of the major limitations faced by Josti and Kodali for the study was the lack of an already established baseline. It is almost like building a house without a foundation. Without a solid base, there is a high level of uncertainty. The authors are venturing into an area that no other examiners have explored yet. Without this gauge, the vector of direction the authors took was in the air. Was it the correct or wrong path? Unknown. It is unknown and hours of work could potentially be groundbreaking or a total bust. Ultimately, this presents a problem of lacking comparison to other studies. It poses only one side of a larger story that readers cannot dive fully into. The second dilemma faced by Josti and Kodali relates to the lower sample size. This factor was identified at the end of their study by themselves. The restriction to only 4 databases could have drastically cut the search and available information significantly. On top of the 4 selected databases, the types of databases may have limited the search for information as well. If one of the databases strictly focused on the manufacturing industry, it could ignore various markets the topic of the research is concerned about. And this potentially specificity on databases, some key information may be buried within the data or completely biased to the point it is unavailable. These 2 limitations play key roles in Josti and Kodali's report, but thankfully do not cripple the overall effort. Although the limitations were noticed in Josti and Kodali's research, the future examinations of their topic can bring a more thorough and deeper insight that can address the original shortfalls. By accomplishing the next evolutionary step, a study can transcend its original form. Not only does it allow the field of study to advance the tools used, but it can expand and augment the already available data. The future scope of the study can ultimately answer the question, where do we go from here? Josti and Kodali can further and improve on their review using 2 possible methods, data increase and an inverse examination. First, a simple increase of data was noted by the authors themselves as a factor and could be improved. This is easy to accomplish and the obvious choice to aid the research. Expanding from the 4 already established databases to 5, 6, or say 7 will dramatically increase the options for article hit and usability. As well, Josti and Kodali could adjust the original search criteria to grow the pool of data from the initial established databases. Either method helps to increase the sample size to better support their conclusions of their review. On top of broadening the sample size, Josti and Kodali could set another new mark by accomplishing a study reversing their focus areas. Instead of focusing on the trendy topics, an evaluation of the rare cases and data could lead to several new findings. Uncommon topics being highlighted creates a new baseline, just like the initial study, for potentially more research to be accomplished. This new perspective can help drive the community to address underlooked topics and issues with the lean manufacturing world. By identifying these gaps in research, a more well-rounded study and story can be presented. These 2 efforts allow Josti and Kodali the ability to further their study/review to help shed more light on empirical research in lean manufacturing.
Now we know what have been the limitations and probably what could have been done more. To conclude, I would like to summarize what we've been discussing. So in this paper, which we've been reviewing and criticizing, they showed each process state of their research. So it was very easy to follow what they have been through and realistic to understand what was the effort they put into their research. And then the methodology of their paper was presented precisely, actually, how they classified the articles, which was in there. And then the findings of this study were sort of creating a basis for further researchers, since this was the first research of this kind, which the authors have been stating a lot, because they didn't want to probably say, okay, it wasn't our fault, because it's the first time they did something like that, or wherever on the world was it. So it was probably just a base for further researchers and where anybody else could hook up in. The limitations have been, yeah, they use sort of just a minimal, but I think that since they've just creating the base, it's the minimal is to create a good overview of the lean manufacturing. These are references. Thank you for your attention, and do you have any questions?
You mentioned in your presentation about, or you gave the indication that there was such an excess of articles on the research of lean. You personally feel like lean in this current time is being overdeveloped or overstudied, or you see my point, or overused in some way?
I see your point, but I think since lean is actually a very important part of a company, I don't think nowadays we have reached this point that it's over-researched or over-discussed.
Yeah.
I don't think we're there yet.
Okay.
If you had to describe the major differences between paper and the results you see in this paper versus the previous paper, how would you say the author's objectives and their findings differ from the previous paper?
Previous paper, like, I didn't understand the question.
So we have two review papers in a row, right? So the previous paper was a review paper, and this is a literature review paper as well. How would you say that this paper differs from the previous one? In terms
The
of
previous ones was more focused on the GID systems, and this paper was basically focused on the empirical study methodologies. So that's all the difference in this paper. And in previously, the researchers' critical reviews have been published in the field of GIT, and it has never been published in the field of empirical. So authors have tried to.
Right. So yeah. So I wasn't talking about necessarily the previous reviews that were mentioned by the authors. I think that's what you're talking about. I was thinking of the paper that we had by the previous team in this class. They had a review paper as well, right? So how would you say the work that you're presenting here and the work from this author is different than that paper?
What we feel in this paper is like, we have honestly, if I say I have not learned anything about lean manufacturing in this paper, because this is more focused on the data collection, what all the methods they have used in their research studies. Like, they talk about the panel study, focus group studies and everything, but that is all the data. They don't discuss the what is panel study, what is focus study, and how lean manufacturing can be implemented in these things. They have not talked in this paper. I thought in the previous papers they have a chance to review what is lean manufacturing, how different things work in a lean manufacturing system. So that's all what I feel in this paper.
Yeah, I think that our paper was basically from the time aspect is before the other research paper is taking place, actually, because the authors from our paper, they're really just describing how to start, how to find your papers, how to classify them, what can I do with them, but they didn't really talk about what was in the papers they researched. So it was more about the process instead of the content, which was different in the other case. Anything else? Any questions?
Thank you. Alright, so just to thank you teams for 3 very interesting presentations. We're going to go ahead and take a short break in a minute, so it's 5:16, so we'll regroup around 5:25. And then just as a reminder, so we have, I'm going to look and see if we can find the other, what this looks like. It looks basically like a USB. So if anybody accidentally picked that up in the shuffle of papers, I know a lot of people have papers up here, but if you guys happen upon this, we're missing one of these for the clicker. So we'll regroup around 5:25, and then then we'll have the last presentations.
Yes. I guess
कौन वो मुझे देख देख के कैसे एक्सप्रेशन लिखता है भाई आज पढ़ाई की उसने एक टीम की प्रेजेंटेशन में पढ़ाई नहीं नहीं भाई एक टीम कैंसिल करते हैं कैंसिल करते शिक्षक में पढ़ाई
Neue Frage geschenkt zu meinem Vortrag.
Echt? Ja, das machen wir.
Kannst du gerne machen. Du kannst schon beantworten. Ja? Also schreib mir jetzt
That's what I think. Nobody's found it yet, so we'll see. Hopefully somebody can finish it. Yeah. Hopefully we can find it.
I still haven't done access back.
You haven't got what?
Access back to
Oh, no. That's very strange.
yes.
Hey, Marika,
Yeah.
can you open the thread? You want me to open the thread?
Oh, yeah, that would be nice.
Okay. I forgot I'm doing this in the walking over. I prepared like for 8 or 9 minutes and I was supposed to have like 3 or 4
I think we had enough. Came over 20 minutes.
20 minutes?
That's totally the rate.
I told her negative point like we haven't learned anything on lean manufacturing from this paper.
Yeah, it was like that.
I don't know if she will take any positive or negative.
That's for critique. So critique is positive or negative. Somebody who is hacking your account, or using your account.
He actually, the person who phoned me in the morning reminded me of policies, and then he said that I should generally this is asked that the IT division doesn't ask us to revise our password. If it happens in between, because it actually happened, I tried to change the password. There was a pop-up which asked me to change the password, so I did. Maybe that is the reason, and he said that we should check the window when they ask for the to change the password.
Right.
They should have tq.edu at the end. So even if you have HTTPS or something, you can't recognize it unless you have edu.edu at the end.
Right.
It was all similar, and I think that maybe happened when I was, because I was using unsecure when I was at the hotel for the cocktails.
Possibly, yeah. Could be. I mean, at that point in time,
But I did change the password after that. Still something like that happened. And I don't know if I'll be able to post this discussion on time today.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah.
actually last time I took about 2 days, but
Well, I think in that case I could probably, I don't know if I can do it right after class, but I could probably do that. Yeah. So I'm not sure what the...
Und da haben wir so einfach den Sound ausgedreht.
Das denke ich auch, ja. Should be good. Ja. surface. And
I'm sorry for that.
oh no, it just has a mind of its own sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
इंटरेस्ट बस है बाकी वो नहीं है। अच्छा इसके लिए नहीं गया था क्या? अरे इसको तो रोज घर पे बुलाता हूँ। अच्छा कौन से घर? लेकिन आते ही नहीं होगा तब। आते आते मैंने अरे बच्चे तुम लोग नहीं तो तुम बोल दो ना मैं चला जाऊंगा लौड़ा तुझे तेरे साथ उसको बोला बड़ा मत अरे तूने पिक सेंड कर दी डाल दी क्या गूगल ड्राइव में लिंक होगा ईमेल में तुझे लिंक आया होगा गूगल ड्राइव अपना टाइटल का नाम ही 3 स्लाइड बना दे ये देखो सेज इसमें इधर डालेंगे हाँ तो चलो इधर डालना चाहिए नहीं
All right, I better wait for him. Yeah.
Would be nice.
Yeah.
अभी इसके दोनों वो है क्या डिस्टेंस है क्या नहीं एक है ना वो क्या नहीं किधर
अलेक्जेंडर वेंडलर है ना पिंक वाइट अरे तू भाई क्या बोल इंट्रोड्यूस कर मेरे को करेगा छोड़ना और ये ओवर भी बोल और फिर नाउ लेट्स स्टार्ट बोलूंगा
अरे टेंशन दे रहा है एक्सेंट मत बोलना अभी 2-3 बार गुजराती में पहन लेना मैं पहले गुजराती में कुछ हाय नमस्ते नमस्ते कर देते वो सेम ही है ना गुजराती में लेना कैसे तो इसके हाथ में थोड़ी है
साले मेरे को लेटर ही नहीं
उन लोगों ने बोला होगा पास करो या ना करो इसका साइन हाँ इसको इसके हाथ में थोड़ी पैसा कर सकते हैं मेरे अंदर
कोई है नहीं भेज उसको दे आई कांटेक्ट करो इसके भाषा
Alex and Anika from Team 3 presenting you the limit.
I mean, he is glad by seeing the book in the conferences. So sometimes you don't even have to read the book. Hey, this guy. And he actually has many conferences and many. And I met. He has another sequel to the book. It's called b8e0516b. And I met a guy, the co-author is Michael Ray.
Okay. All right.
I think he's coming.
Are we good to go?
Can you please turn it on?
It's not turned on.
It's green.
Yeah, it's turned on.
Yeah, Tata boy.
All right. Good day, everyone. We are Team 3, and this is Annika. I am Alex, and our third teammate is an off-campus student by the name of Serge. Now, we are going to talk about lean principles, lean practices, and precisely about a paper called Exploring the Importance of Cultural Collectivism and the Efficiency of Lean Practices, taking an organizational and national perspective. Now, we will have the following agenda. We're talking about the research context of the paper. We'll be talking about the study itself, about its purpose, the methodology, and its findings. And we will criticize. We'll talk about its limitations, its opportunities, and the relations to the work of Deming and Dijker. And finally, we'll be discussing and making a conclusion. Now, the research context. In 2010, Noah et al. And his colleagues published a study by the name of The Globalization of Operations in Eastern and Western Countries, unpacking the relationship between national and organizational culture and its impact on manufacturing performance. Now, their findings were that, at least their study suggests, that collectivism and individualism play an important role for the success of various management practices. Now, collectivism and individualism. It's a pretty interesting topic regarding cultures. And in the 1980s, a man called Hofstede, he's from the Netherlands, he's a cultural researcher, and he developed what he called certain dimensions of culture. One of these dimensions is individualism versus collectivism. Now, a culture can either be, or has a certain dynamic, and he said on a scale from 0 to 100, culture is either very collectivistic, this is 0, that would mean they're very team-oriented, group thinking, hierarchical, and they're basically not just living for the greater good, but they're always concerned with their whole culture, with their whole surrounding. On the other hand, there are very individual cultures. There, everyone is very concerned with himself, and one might say a little bit self-centric. Now, to get a feeling for this different cultures, the Filipinos, for example, they have a collectivism level or individual level of 6, what basically means they're living for the greater good. Other cultures, like the Japanese, they have a 49. So also they are very balanced. Now, okay, I got curious, and of course I looked up where Germany lies. It's 67. So we are a little bit more individualistic. And of course there are the Americans. Okay, what do you think on a scale from 0 to 100, where lies an American citizen in regard to his individualism.
And how does the scale work again? The higher it is, the
0
more
is
individualism?
collectivistic, 100 would be completely individualistic.
About 150.
Very close, but wrong.
I remember it was 80 something.
Yeah, to be precise, it was 91. So the individual placed itself very much in the center of its focus. Not totally, but quite a lot. Now, knowing that, we go to the next study. This study was conducted by Power and his colleagues in 2011, and it got the catchy name, The Cultural Characteristics of Individualism and Collectivism. A competitive study of implications for investments and operations between emerging Asians and industrialized Western countries. Now, what their findings were, the organizational culture has a stronger effect on manufacturing performance than national culture. So we got basically the spirit of a nation, that would be the national culture, and the spirit of an organization, their values, their beliefs, and the dynamics that people have in it. Now, that's called the organizational culture. And they say, okay, the organizational culture has a strong effect on manufacturing performance than the national culture. But they only analyzed 3 dimensions of culture. These were power distance, future orientation, and performance orientation. Now, some people, Bean-Garten, he's called, and his colleagues, they conducted a study based on those 2. And, well, they aimed to answer 2 research questions that emerged from those other studies. These questions were, number 1, does collectivism as a national and organizational culture has a positive impact on the efficiency of lean practices? Now, they want to know, the more collectivistic, so the more team-oriented the culture is, the better lean practices work, or don't. Who knows? And the other part, can an organization collectivism offset the potential negative impact of an individualistic national culture, for example, Germans, Americans, on the efficiency of lean practices? So, if a plant is called in the US or in Germany, have a very collectivistic dynamic, very collectivistic culture, can it offset the national culture that is in the mind of the people? In order to answer those 2 questions, they developed 3 different procedures. The first one, the impact of lean practices on operational performance is stronger in plants situated in nations with a collectivistic culture. Right? The impact of lean practices on operational performance is stronger in plants practicing higher levels of collectivistic culture. And last, plants situated in nations with a less favorable individualistic culture can overcome these negative influences through practicing high levels of collectivistic organizational culture. Now, how did they want to answer those questions? Through a reverse analysis of sample data. Well, this sample data they got from 932 plants situated in Australia, Belgium, Italy, Republic of Ireland, and the US. They're a Spanish research team, at least the 2 main champions, let's call them that, of the study. The other one is from Ireland. And therefore, they are focusing on the Western world, especially Europe. And what did they do? Okay, they got those data samples. They got questionnaires, different questions regarding what kinds of lean practices are applied and in what measure. Now, then they got the results and tested this results for consistency. Therefore, they developed a model based on the hypothesis and tested, okay, does our data work with the model we developed? And they did a confirmatory factor analysis. The ones of everyone who's a statistician that is probably knows this kind of test. It's usually used in psychology or social studies. And it is to test whether the data fits the hypothesized measurement models. So now, what did they do further? They tested for construct validity, and what means basically they checked if the model they developed measures what it claims to be measured. So is it effective? They came to the conclusion, yes it is. They checked for the common method bias. So when we got a variation in our data, there are two possible reasons. One of those reasons might be the data we took. Give me 1 second. Okay, the data we took shows a variancy due to the way we measured it, or does it show variancy due to our model? And to test for that, well, they came to the conclusion, yeah, there's no concern. The measurement was right. And they also checked for the non-response bias, and they came to the conclusion that there's no supporting evidence for this. Now, what were the findings? What they found regarding question 1 was, once again, does collectivism at the national and organizational culture have a positive impact on the efficiency of lean practice? The answer was yes, definitely. The test results show that national culture is an important factor when implementing and exercising lean practices. It's really interesting, especially for industrial engineers, since we also have to think about, okay, we have methods like lean practices, but can we apply them in agriculture? And they say, well, it's definitely important to check the culture. And the second question, can organizational collectivism offset the potential negative impact of an individualistic national culture on the efficiency of lean practice? And they said, no. If you got a very individual national culture, Germany, the US, for example, we can't offset these effects by implementing, or at least we cannot totally do that, by having a very collectivistic culture, organization culture. Now, coming to the critique, there is a variety of limitations, especially regarding the statistic models applied, and our upcoming student is going to talk about them in detail. Please.
Greetings, I'm Chetri with Alex and Anika from Team 3 presenting you the limitation of the paper exploring the importance of cultural collectivism on the efficacy of lean practices. Some ground rules for this presentation, assuming all the attendees listeners have a strong background on regression analysis and modeling. Presentation will be attempting to use simplified language and very brief summary of the totality of this paper. Active listening will be required. So $1 million question is, can you compare apple against oranges? Well, yes, mathematically we can compare. If we introduce a middleman, the person who can eat apple and oranges, and do the comparison. Although it may not seem feasible in our practical reality, mathematically we can do it. And these terms, the Batman in this case, are called moderators. Let's get back to our paper, which is to compare our national culture and organizational culture against lean practices. Comparison of national culture against lean practices was hypothesized by authors as H1, and S2 hypothesis accounted for the organizational culture for the lean practices. And S3 is the hypothesis which combines national culture plus organizational cultures and compares its influence on lean practices. The moderator in our case in this paper was found out to be operational performance. The question still exists, can we do such type of comparison? Well, according to authors H1, which is the first hypothesis of comparing national culture against lean practices, was proven to be true. That is, the national culture had influence on lean practices. As soon as you have a better national culture, you get better lean practices and better operational performance. H2 was also proven to be true. However, the hypothesis 3, H3, was denied by authors. We went through all the parameters provided, all the data provided in the paper, and found out a lot of limitations which are presented in this paper. That is the limitation in the misaligned concepts, the limitation in the misinterpreted statistical results for each hypothesis, for sample size, adjusted R-squared, VIF interpretation, and the missing model, which is misinterpreted CFA. I will go through all these limitations with the very brief descriptions. However, let's start with this saying from H.L. McCann. That is, for every complex problem, there is a solution that is simple, neat, but wrong. As I am assigned to find the limitation in the paper, you might all have guessed that I am not going to talk very nice about the paper itself. Okay, the first limitation, misaligned concepts, is subdivided into multiple other subcategories, which is loyalty versus collectivism. Author suggested loyalty is directly related to collectivism. However, we could not find any statement anywhere suggesting there is a direct relationship between loyalty to the collectivism. Comparing apples against oranges, authors found direct relationship of national culture to the lean practices, and also found national culture to the lean practices. However, in our findings, we could not confirm it to be true. Similarly, hypothesis 3 was rejected by authors, and also we could not confirm the rejection of this hypothesis 3, which is the combination of both our national culture and national culture hypothesis. The biggest limitation of this paper was the introduction of the operational performance as the moderator, and also the introduction of other variables as the moderators without any description or without any relation to other variables. It seemed as if the authors deliberately introduced these unknown variables in their analysis without its relationship to the lean practices, cultures, or regressive variables. Even the introduction of the operational performance as a moderator in this paper did not provide any uses for these hypotheses presented by authors. Although the questionnaires were presented at the appendix section of this paper, the purpose of these questionnaires were misaligned with the research itself. Similarly, we found misalignment to the paper objectives against the conclusion. Example, paper suggested use of 5-point Likert scale. However, there were no discussions related to the binomial findings or the binomial regression analysis. Likert scale has its own limitation. Example, central tendency bias, social desirability bias, faking good bias, faking bad bias, non-defiance bias. However, none of these biases were included in the research. Similarly, there were limitations related to inaccurate use of variables and the regression analysis itself. The first one was OSL weakness, that is, the weakness of OSL were not considered by authors to analyze their findings. Authors never mentioned the analysis of validation against the outliers, non-linearity, too many or too less variables impact dependence against other variables, choices used for error function. Similarly, multicollinearity were misinterpreted by authors. The regression equation of this research is a multivariate polynomial regression if done accurately. That suggests that there is a high chance multiple regression variables are independent and non-correlated, which contradicted the author's statements on the conclusion of hypothesis H1 and H2. Similarly, impossible regressors were used in the paper. According to the paper, X1 is the plant size or the number of employees, and X2 is industry. These are the two regressors which were stated by authors being used in this regression analysis, but the real value of these X1 and X2 came from the sample size rather than coming from the response of the questionnaires, which means, example, 441 surveys were conducted in mechanical industry, then this is the form it takes. In that case, the value of xi will never be 441, rather it will be the response from the questionnaires. Authors took 441 as the value for x. There were 4 stages used in this analysis, and they kept transforming all the moderators into the regressors, which is not an easy thing to be done mathematically. There were many missing variables in the author's finding. That is, the paper suggested use of equipment layout, Kanban batch sizes, order release into manufacturing and maintenance, and housekeeping as the variables to determine the relationship to the lean practices. Although the survey contained these questions in the questionnaire, so we found no use of these variables anywhere in the author's analysis. So the question is, where did these variables go? Not just as a misaligned concepts or inaccurate use of variables and regression analysis, there were misinterpreted statistical results in the paper. The first one was the sample error. Author suggested use of 3 types of samples, which is number of employees, industry sample, and half-step IDB sample. In all these sample cases, we found high level of standard deviation and accuracy being around 5%. Similarly, on misinterpreted statistical results for adjusted R-score, for all of these hypotheses, the results were unacceptable. For the hypothesis, R-score adjusted was 0.081, and authors confirmed that hypothesis 3 has been denied, which is 3-way interaction term. Similarly, for hypothesis 2, a 2-way interaction term, R-score was 0.083, and it just accounted for 8.3% of the total variability. Only 8.3% of the data points are accounted by the model for hypothesis S2. In simple word, if you find accuracy to be about 8.3%, then that model is not accepted easily. However, in our case, authors accepted hypothesis 2 to be true. It was the same situation with hypothesis 1, which also had adjusted R-square equal to 0.083, suggesting 8.3% of the total variability being accounted by the model. And in our finding, we could not confirm it to be acceptable. In attempt to remove the multicollinearity, authors forcefully introduced VIF to be below 2. However, they forgot the fact that there had to be linearity in national culture against lean practices and also organizer culture against lean practices. Authors suggested use of confirmatory factor analysis. Starts with specifying initial model and then ends with the final fitted model. However, we didn't find any model being presented in the paper. That is, the paper doesn't contain the final base fitted model. Those were the reason why we came up to the point where we could not determine the final result, because the original data were not available for us to do the validation of the author's findings. And also, we could not perform complete ANOVA analysis, t-statistic analysis, A-test, confidence interval analysis, adequacy test, Malloy statistical analysis, outlier analysis, nonlinearity analysis, all because of missing originally used data in these research. The references to this paper are here. I will leave it open for a few seconds. So before I leave, let me remind you, don't forget, we are expecting to get questions on this presentation. Please use discussion board to ask us any question on the limitation. Good luck. Signing off, CH3.
I would like to continue with the opportunities after the presentation of the limitations. And the paper provided several opportunities, but we are focusing on 3 main opportunities. And for their sample, they used a small and medium-sized plant as a control variable, because lean practices is depending on the industry type and the plant size. And the first opportunity is the plant size itself, because the paper is focusing on small or medium-sized companies, and it might be interesting to focus on larger companies as well, because those companies have different impacts, and they are working worldwide, and people from different cultures have to work together, and therefore it is interesting to focus on that as well. And for that, it is very important to have a good understanding of the national culture. And larger companies are also not working in a uniform work environment, and therefore it might be interesting to focus on them as well. I'm continuing with the second opportunity. These are the performance dimensions, and the paper is mainly focusing on operational performance through a single dimension. And our suggestion is to focus on all four operational performance dimensions. These are the cost, dependability, flexibility, and quality. And it might be interesting to focus on the impact of those four dimensions and how the national and cultural is influenced by those different dimensions. And it is also important to analyze those dimensions in detail, because it is important to have a look how they can be associated with the strategic goals of the company too. Our third opportunity, we provided is the variety of cultural dimensions, and our suggestion is to focus on other dimensions of Hofstede as well. There might be the power distance, the long-term orientation, or the individualism, and it might be interesting to focus on those dimensions and how they have an influence on the lean practice. It might be that power distance is the most influential cultural element, because it affects all total quality elements, and therefore it is important to focus on that. And it is obvious that there's importance to focus on other cultural dimensions, not only on individualism and collectivism. I'm presenting now the relations to Deming and Leica, and I'm beginning with the relations to Deming. When Deming wrote about culture, he emphasizes the difference between the Western and Japanese culture, and for him the Japanese culture is much more collectivistic than the American one, and for him this is also the reason why the Japanese had a great economic presentation after the 1950s, because there's a team effort, and they also implemented different methodologies to improve their outcome. And it is possible to find many similarities or similar findings between the relation of cultural behavior and the influence on lean practices in general. Now I'd like to continue with the relation to Leica. There are also some possible relations we could identify, and a major aspect of the Toyota production system is the team effort and the commitment to the company. And this is also something we found in our paper, so this is a obvious relation. And and the underlines the relationship between collectivistic culture and the success of Toyota production system is obvious, and therefore it is important to focus on Leica as well. I would like now to provide our conclusion. Even though Serge mentioned a lot of limitations, we think that he conducted a study that contributes to the current research in the area of lean practices very well, and it can furthermore be used as a basic for future researches. And it is obvious that this is just a sample, and it is important to focus on other dimensions as well, as I already mentioned. And also Deming and Leica provided some important points which are applicable in this paper as well, and therefore it can be seen that it is important to focus on the collectivism and individualism in a lean practice because of the globalization and the networking between companies. This part is becoming more important each day, and therefore we think this is a good basic work. Yeah. So here I listed our references, and if there are any questions left, you're free to ask.
On these particular aspects of collectivism versus individualism in this study and others, I'm sure, is there any indication given by any authors that this is a reflection of good or good versus bad. In other words, you know, an indulgent, hedonistic culture just being decadent or what have you, and therefore non-productive and non-suitable? Any such thing?
We were checking Gerd Hofster's site. He checked that 6 dimensions.
Yeah, there are more dimensions. Yeah, in my opinion, it's not between hate or not hate. It's just the culture, and yeah, we are born in that culture, and therefore it's important to be able to understand other cultures as well. And it might not be a bad habit to live in an individualism culture. It is just important to be able to understand the collectivism as well, and to adapt some of those thinkings in their own behavior to get a lean practice or to get it available. And yeah, I think it is important that all cultures are working together or have basic understanding of each other. Does this answer your question?
Certainly.
Okay. Do you want to add something? Okay.
In the conclusion of the paper, it was suggested that the negative effects of being situated in a country which is more individualistic cannot be completely overcome by practicing a collective lean approach. Did the authors suggest any ways of overcoming it, or any particular way of adapting lean to the individualistic approach, or anything like that?
That's actually fairly easy. No, they didn't work in any way any further at this topic.
Okay.
So this is one of those points for future research. Yes.
Now, I can maybe find a counterexample about collectivistic country that is not developed. Mexico, for instance. I'm from here. I have the moral authority to talk about, and we think that the reason for our underdeveloped is the institutions that rule in the country. For instance, let's say there is a book called Bad Capitalism, Good Capitalism, and the capitalism that we have, what we call chronic capitalism, capitalism of friends. And there is another book that I don't remember what's the name, but it's also talking, and that's the book that is influencing the people, the academics in Mexico, that why we are not developed after we follow the capitalism recipe of the United States. And we are really collectivistic people. We are not individualistic. So that's why my counterexample is like to the author that says that there is like a correlation or an observation that being collectivistic is a way of develop a country.
But
that's what I
development of
understand.
a country and technology development is something different than applying lean practices. For example, even on a, Pacific island, where you organize your coconut transfer, you can apply lean practices without being in any way
that was just a counterexample to the author. That I was thinking that he was like correlating too much, maybe what I observed in the presentation, that the author is making a huge emphasis, or what I understood of the presentation of individualism versus collectivism.
Yes.
And I'm just saying that there's a collectivist culture that is not doing well in many things. That's what I'm saying. Like it is not. Sometimes it's not only about individualism versus collectivism. It could be many other co-factors that are over there.
I think this is a really good example. What we already said, it's not possible to give a general answer for collectivism or individualism. It is important to do further research and to have a look at each particular case. And yeah, this is a good example that collectivism is not always best or the one solution for lean practice and development.
That was the.
Yeah. All right. Any other questions?
So you guys mentioned the ability to look, or possibility to look at other cultural dimensions, right, that you think might impact lean. And I don't know, I guess I should prep this, but I don't know how much you looked into Hofstede's model and the cultural dimensions. If you did do some of that investigation, do you see any other cultural dimensions that you would think would be the, hey, I want to investigate this one next? because there's a thought or a reason why it might impact lean practices?
Yeah. I think the example I mentioned here, the power distance.
Oh, yes,
it might be a good example because it's has impact or influences all aspects of total quality elements, and the elements like customer focus, continuous improvement, employees empowerment, quality tools, all these affected by power distance, and therefore our suggestion is to focus on that as well. And long-term philosophy and individualism might be some other points to focus on.
Good. Yeah, I guess I missed that. I must have been writing a note while you were saying. Yeah, very, very good. And then I think you rightly pointed out that really this model doesn't explain much of the variance in the outcome, right? It's at 8%, not 8, or roughly, that is explained even by the final model. I guess what other variables do you think might have explained the variance in the outcome, other than maybe looking at other variance and other cultural dimensions? Are there any other thoughts about why so little variance was explained by this model?
I'd say this is more of the speciality of our off-campus students. I'm afraid I can't give what answer for
Didn't focus on that. I think you can provide a proper answer for that.
I remember the name of the other book is Why Nation Fails.
Why Nation Fails?
Yeah, that's the other book. It's a big study that they're relating why the institution that rule in the country is the causes that some countries are underdeveloped. If you take that institution as a government and put it in a company, it can also be replicated why the company is not successful. Yeah, if you're taking the same model institution from the government to a company. That was the main point.
And another comment is, like, most of the cases whenever you're speaking about quality and culture, Western culture is criticized based on the applications of a tool which was developed in Japan. So, that doesn't make any sense. Whereas Six Sigma on the other side is developed in US. And no one criticizes Japan for not using effectively Six Sigma.
Oh, definitely. It's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy to say,
Yeah.
They work pretty well in collectivistic cultures. Certainly they do.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, team.
Sometime this week call for a meeting, on campus, off campus, sub meeting, and discuss that.
All right. So, all right, so some very interesting discussion on these papers. Unfortunately, we're kind of at an awkward place where it's we've got 15 minutes left. Is it not on? Okay, yes it is. All right. So, as I was saying, some very interesting discussion about these papers. Unfortunately, at the place we're at, we have about 15 minutes left, and I don't want the next team to have to stop in the middle of their presentation. So we are going to go ahead and hold off on that presentation. Sorry, you guys got all dressed up, and then we'll have a present next time. So next time we'll start with Team 2, and then Team 7, and Team 9, and then that way I can more easily adjust if there are any adjustments need to be made. But we should have plenty of time for those presentations and start on the Six Sigma material. So for the discussion board today, or discussion board for this week, we will have the next 4 teams be the ones that will have questions addressed to. So for the first week, it was teams, the first 4 teams, so teams 8, so 10, 8, 12, 5, were the ones fielding the questions. You had until yesterday to post your questions, so the teams have until tomorrow to post their response. And this next week we'll have teams 5 through 8. So teams 5 through 8 will field the questions, and then so that means that the last team that presented today, team 3, will wait until next week to have your questions. And so we'll do that discussion board that way. So before we sign off, since we do have some extra time, we can have some discussion. Does anybody have some, like I said, we saw this whole set of papers, and I think there was some very interesting discussion of the papers. Does anybody have some overall thoughts about Lean or about things that they learned from the papers today? Whether it's about the content of the paper, maybe what to do or what not to do in research? Yes?
There are so many different points which have to be considered when applying or implementing Lean. And I think it's really nice to see those different aspects, because otherwise it's not so easy to collect them all, and with the different papers, each paper provides different thoughts, and that's really nice.
Yes, every paper kind of has a different perspective on Lean and what Lean means, and it is such a broad system. I think both Lean and Total Quality are both very overarching, broad systems. It's kind of interesting when you said to see the different perspectives. Yes?
One common limitation that I've noticed in many presentations is that most of the authors considered a specific set of countries like single or double country. So I'd say that when they do a research which has so much legibility, that they can go further and expand their research by considering a lot of countries. That will actually improve the research.
Right, so they tend to be focused on a limited set of countries, or
They more focus on developed countries rather than the developing countries.
That's a good point. Yeah, are you saying that? Yeah, most of the research here does focus on developed countries, and why would that be? Do you think?
It might be the case like developing countries are not using the more advanced technologies rather than the developed countries.
Yeah, that would be an interesting question to see. Is it just because there's not as much use of these techniques in the developing countries? Is it more because most more of the authors
But actually
from
the developing countries are updating themselves, and they are using all the techniques that have been used and developed. So they are actually updating themselves. So it would be better if they consider all.
Yeah, I mean, my thought would be that they are using it. I think it may be more linked to the fact of where the authors are coming from than potentially where the countries that are using the techniques. Yes?
I remember which he said the difference between a developed and an undeveloped country, even though they're using the same technology, the updated technology, is the lack of experimentation.
Interesting.
That was what he said.
So his point is that Taguchi apparently said that all countries were using the same basic technology, but what differentiated the top performers, or the developed country versus the developing countries, was it the developed countries use more experimentation?
Yeah. They do more experiments. They generate more knowledge. They try to optimize their processes. They are not complacent. That was pretty much what Taguchi said. I think it was in the very beginning of one of his books.
That'd be interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I agree with him on that or not.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with that.
Because the developer says Taguchi. It's not me.
Yeah.
Go deep with Taguchi.
Yeah, not Armando's, right?
The point is, as speaking of experimentation, he said the developed countries have the possibility to experiment, but again, it depends on the available resources. Yeah. Probably developing countries don't have the resource to experiment.
Right.
And actually, the developed countries have a mindset that they have obtained results from the set of examples, so they don't try to experiment. Rather, the developing countries are new to the phase, and they'll try different things, and they'll find a new method. Maybe.
Yeah, so that was interesting thought. So one thought is maybe he's right that developing countries have less experimentation, but the problem, if that's true, is probably maybe a resource issue. Another thought is maybe the developing countries might have more experimentation, maybe not in the systematic.
Yeah, they're not
design
set with something. Yeah.
Term, but
they don't have a fixed set of techniques to work on, so they'll try everything, and then they'll finalize on the perfect principle that would suit their country.
So you say you tend to experiment a lot because you don't have a best practice standard that says everybody.
Until they get a perfect set of principles to follow, they'll try everything possible.
Yeah, so it's more lack of best practice. That's a good thought.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, there are many counter examples, but I would provide one example in favor of Taguchi. For instance, where the radio communication started in the United States, what we Mexico did was get the United States law of radio communication translated to Spanish, implemented. We never developed we never understood why AM
FM, the power, all that stuff. We just took the law, translated, implemented. So you lack all the knowledge. It's like building.
Yeah.
It's like copying.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's more imitation, more copying, maybe than there is, I guess, development of new knowledge.
And also, we did the
perhaps.
same
Yeah.
thing with the environmental law.
Yeah.
So we did not research what was the key factors.
That's true. Although I think a lot of copying probably happens within U.S. companies too. After you have the first mover, with other developed countries. Yes. Yeah.
Maybe developing countries are not implementing the tools in a large scale. That is required for a research, for a study.
So maybe there's pockets of implementation, but not a large
Maybe
scale implementation.
they are using the lean tools or quality tools in a smaller scale,
Right.
okay, which may not qualify them as a research field or a study field.
Right, or maybe harder to find those companies that are using the tools. Maybe if there's, depending on what extent there maybe are some knowledge sharing groups and across the country, or benchmarking groups or conferences. It may be harder for the researchers to access those companies unless they have a first-hand knowledge of what companies are using the
Another
tools.
thing is access to data. Access to data. Maybe developing companies in developing countries, they are not keeping their documents or they are not exposing their errors.
So there's maybe a little bit more reluctance to sharing data, maybe in some of the developing countries. Yeah, I guess if that's your competitive advantage, and of course there is in developed countries too, but if you're viewing that as your competitive advantage, you might be less willing to share. Yeah.
Another thing is that also their market. Their market is very limited, so their companies expand is also very limited. But in developing countries, their company span is very huge. The market is also huge, which actually give them an edge to implement them in a larger scale and also involve other countries in the multinational field.
That's a good point. Maybe some of the scale of operations as well. And then
Developing countries also suffer from brain drain. Engineers from there shift to US and all.
That's true too. So that's a kind of a general problem with knowledge transfer and keeping practice up to date. Is go on. Yeah.
We have a live example here.
Right. That's true. Yeah, we do. Yeah, I think. Yeah, pretty much almost everybody in this room is from a different country, right? And there's a couple of us. So. Yeah, Calvin? Yeah.
I just wanted to share, in terms of academic research, I agree with Muzita because now, even though we want to do a lot of research, we are having a lot of limitations in our universities itself. Like in my country, we don't have access to other articles. If we want to do research, we have to purchase them on our own. Like we don't have free databases. It's very limited. So the ability for us to contribute to new research is actually, restrained by all those facilities that are available to us. Resources, it is a limitation for us. Yeah.
Yes, so sometimes not even just the financial resources, the knowledge resources as well. So, yeah. So I think we've identified a good area of research, actually, when we're looking at that idea of the diffusion of lean practices. As mentioned, the literature review focuses mostly on developed countries because the data is coming primarily from developed countries, but to look at the diffusion within developing countries would be very interesting, and to see what are those major factors. Is it maybe an infrastructure issue, lack of knowledge transfer, is it lack of resources, other types of resources, is it just lack of communication within the industry? So there's I think a lot of factors that could be at work if we do see that there is a slower diffusion, but then there also might be quicker diffusion. It just may be less standard diffusion. You might see, like you said, I guess one extreme options we might say is maybe we think maybe more copying and therefore maybe less successful because we just try to, and one of the points that Liker makes in his book is made by some authors as well, is you can't just directly copy what Toyota does and expect the same results. You've got to have more general principles that you're using. So one thing we might say we expect more attempts at copying, but then also we may see more attempts at customizing. So actually, it'd be very interesting to do. And I think there have been a few studies that have looked at, definitely at lean outside the U.S. I know there's been some studies in Mexico and Brazil, and those would be, I guess, either developing or newly developed economies in those cases. I know there's been some studies in India as well, but I don't know if there's been any studies that have looked at differences between more developing economies and developed economies in terms of lean. So I think most of them have focused in Europe, or the United States, or Spain, or Germany, or Japan. So that there's more focus on the developed countries. So that's a good point. I like that idea. So in addition to the idea of looking at national culture and the impacts, is looking at the just the state of the economy, where the economy is in terms of their development and their, I guess if you look, it's probably there's some more general technology diffusion literature that probably can inform that, but with lean practices specifically, it would be interesting to look at that idea. Good discussion point. Any other thoughts or?
From a cultural perspective, again, it's the same thing. People speak only about Japan and its application in America.
Right.
Nobody has identified any other cultural pockets globally. Like, what is its, the bridge between US and Japanese culture in Europe or any other locations?
Yeah. So maybe you see if there's you're saying looking at Japan's kind of the extreme, but trying to see if there's a middle ground where we can see maybe some effectiveness still.
Yes.
I think supporting his comment, it would be awesome if somebody, I mean, not me, but somebody in the future of an organization did research about lean diffusion in the BRICS. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa.
Yeah.
Because they are a group of emerging economies, and they are clustered. I mean, because they have similar similar characteristics that can be classified as a cluster. Because with all respect, Mexico don't belong to them.
It's a similar.
I don't know, because we're not similar, according to the guy that named the BRICS, that coined that term. He said, like, they are not similar to them. That's why, and also we think that it's a matter of marketing, because can you imagine BRICS?
That's true. Some of it may be driven by similar.
But we don't know. We just joke about it
marketing.
in economics.
So very interesting. Yeah.
And that can be compared with doing a separate analysis on G8 nations, which are industrially advanced nations, and then a comparison with BRICS will make sense.
And then maybe some companies outside the BRICS as well to see what the differences are.
BRICS-M.
Yeah, that would be very interesting study. So I think anybody that wants to do a dissertation in lean or some research, or just probably identify like 3 or 4 dissertations. Yeah.
That kind of studies, they cost money, so they should be funded by the big organization.
Yeah. One thing about the last study is actually had a really large sample size. They had almost 1,000 companies, 972. So it actually was a pretty big sample size, and they did have quite a bit of diversity. Now, I think as you mentioned, the sample size was all focused, I think, or primarily focused, or all focused on developed countries. It still was quite a bit of diversity. So as I said, to get the study really at that point in time, you have to team up probably multiple researchers than like having just like a single researcher trying to conduct that study.
May I able to give another?
Yeah, go ahead.
But what he said about Gerd Hofstede, I remember that I had a professor in marketing, and he said like we can classify marketing before Gerd and after Gerd.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because when you were working in marketing, you didn't understand culture. You thought people in marketing, they usually used to think that marketing is like a gunshot. You shot, and it should be the same thing for everything, but now you have to adjust everything to each different culture.
Yeah, you have to customize and think about what'll work in that culture, right?
Yeah, that was the funny part. Marketing before Gerd and after Gerd.
That's true. Good. Well, really good discussion. Very interesting discussion. I'm looking forward to seeing the last 3 presentations, and of course see what happens with the discussion on the Blackboard. So we will regroup again next Thursday for the last 3 presentations. If anybody does happen across that little clicker thing, please turn that in, and then I guess then we're done for today. So,
Did you taste it?